Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 11th European Feminist Research Conference, organized by Atgender and the University of Milano-Bicocca. My name is Angeliki, Sifaki, and together with Sibel, Yardimci, we currently serve as the chairs of Atgender. It is our real pleasure to welcome you all today. As you are aware, this conference was scheduled to take place 1 year ago. This means that for all of us being here today, we have survived a highly lethal pandemic and a European-based war. And this is quite a privilege already. I hope you are looking forward to the coming discussions as much as I am. Before I hand over the floor to Sveva, allow me to express my feelings of deep gratitude to all those who have contributed to this conference. First off, I would like to cordially thank our distinguished speakers, Professor Carmen from the University of Milano-Bicocca, Professor Jasper Puar from Rutgers University, Professor Barbara Risman from the University of Illinois, and Professor Joanna Zielinska from King's College University. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Next, I am grateful to Atgender institutional and individual members. As I hope Atgender has made clear on different occasions, without you, this conference would not have been possible. I also find the opportunity to thank those generous members who have contributed to our fundraising campaign for precarious scholars. With your contribution, this year Atgender has been able to cover the cost of 51 precarious scholars attending this conference. As you may have observed already, we have the privilege of holding our conference in the beautifully equipped buildings of the University of Milano-Bicocca. I wish to warmly thank the Rector of the University, Gentile Professoressa Patricia Cesteca, gentile rettrice, vi voglio ringraziare per la vostra generosa ospitalità. I would also like to thank the Director of the Department of Sociology and Social Sciences. Dear Director, Professor Stefanizzi, I cannot thank you enough for the generous support you provided to this conference. My thanks and appreciation also to Ca' Foscari University of Venice, specifically to Sabrina Marchetti, a former board member of Atgender, and of course to the University of Calabria, specifically to a former chair of Atgender, Giovanna Vingelli, and her wonderful team. And now I wish to turn to the local organizing team. To say that this cooperation has been one of the best of my academic life so far would already be an understatement. Dear Sveva Magaraggia, Arianna Mainardi, Daniela Cherubini, and Stefania Voli, please accept my sincere gratitude for your assistance, guidance, encouragement, support, and time. Dearest Sveva, over the years, I have come to value highly 3 qualities: empathy, sharing responsibility, a good sense of humor. Thank you for having them all. Next, I would like to thank the scientific committee of the conference: Giovanna Vingelli, Adriano, Habed, Elia, Arfini, Sabrina Marchetti, Sveva Magaraggia, Arianna Mainardi, Daniela Cherubini, and Stefania Voli for their considerable efforts and assistance throughout the preparation of this conference. Last, but not least, I would like to cordially thank 2 people, the backbone of this conference. Dearest Marco Baccio, thank you for our cooperation and for everything you have done for this conference. Dearest Alma Levy, Atgender is really lucky to have you on board. Thank you for always going above and beyond. I wish you all a stimulating conference. Sveva?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angeliki, for your kind words. Welcome to you all again. You can't imagine how happy we are to see this Aula Magna so full again after so many years. And before going into the details of the conference and of telling you a little bit of the back work that we did, I'm really happy to give the floor to Professor Patrizia Steca. Patrizia is the director of the Equal Opportunities Office of our university, and she stands in for the dean who could not come today because she's busy. Professor Giovanna Iannantuoni is our dean, and she was busy today. Thank you very much, really, for all the institutional support you gave us.
Thank you, Sveva. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our university. It's really a great pleasure to have all of you here. Our rector couldn't be here. Giovanna is very sad for her absence, and she asked me to bring you her warmest greetings and to open the conference in her place. This is an honor and really a pleasure for me. This is our first big international conference in presence after more than 2 years of online meetings, conferences, and events. And it's really huge. It's really a huge conference. We have more than 200 attendees from very different countries and cultures. I'm very happy and proud that our university has taken up the challenge of organizing such a big event, because I think we really need to meet again, to see closely. After more than 20 years, this conference, the European Feminist Research Conference, is back in Italy. And this represents a further reason for pride and joy for us. Organizing this great event of 2 years of Zoom, Google Meet, WebEx, Teams, Skype meetings, very boring things that all of us know very well, was not easy. So I'd really want to thank all the people that has contributed for the organization of the conference. The scientific committee, our Department of Sociology and Social Research, and in particular, the local organizing committee, Sveva, Magaraggia, Arianna Mainardi, Daniela Cherubini, and all the other people who worked so hard for organizing all of this. A special thank you to the European Association for Gender Research, Education and Documentation for all the work, the support, and the trust. The conference places gender research in a very broad, multidisciplinary and an intersectional perspective, and addresses salient, very burning issues. The program, in my vision, highlights very well how gender issue goes far beyond the intimate individual dimension and involves social, economic, and cultural dimensions that are constantly changing and are facing multiple crises nowadays. Studies on gender have a long tradition in our university. Gender has been a key topic almost since its foundation. We have several research groups, local and national scientific centers dealing with these issues, and many scientific realities and many colleagues working specifically on gender or adopting a gender perspective in their research. Our sociology and also psychology departments have so far given the greatest contribution in our university, both in terms of scientific research and translational activity. But I have to say that I'm noticing an increasing effort in adopting a gender perspective, even in studies that are not related to social disciplines. Of course, there is still a lot to do to get disciplines to talk to each other, and then to build knowledge together and to act together to mobilize material, social, let's say, human resources. This is why I believe that conferences like this may be a crucial opportunity to encourage dialogue and comparison between different perspectives and disciplines, languages. I hope this Congress may represent an opportunity to build personal and interpersonal resources for all of you. I don't want to keep any further time, so I leave the floor to the next speaker, and I wish you to enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. It is a great pleasure for me to bring greetings from the Department of Sociology and Social Research to this important international event. It is a very successful conference. We have got more than 700 abstracts, and in my opinion, this is a demonstration that our scientific community is eager to meet and discuss, in particular on issues concerning gender studies, gender research and gender studies. Our department has a special vocation on developed over the years on gender studies in both teaching and research activities. Thank you to Sveva, Daniela, Arianna, and Stefania, and all those who made this important event possible. Have a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. I know that Professor Stefanizzi has to rush back to our department because of a meeting, but thank you very much for your kind words and really for the support we got from our department. Thanks. I have to say, when I was thinking about this opening in the last weeks, I was thinking back at my first European Feminist Research Conference. Can you remember your first Atgender European Feminist Research Conference? I see many heads nodding. Do you remember the feelings, the atmosphere, the discussions, the many papers, the evenings out, the food, maybe the books that we got from Atgender? Well, actually mine was exactly 22 years ago in Bologna. At the beginning of the new century, after a noise summer school, we all went to this conference. And after 22 years, we managed to bring it back to Italy, and we are really happy and proud that we managed to do that. It's in these 2 decades, we think that a new generational wave of feminist scholars has emerged with our own different ways of networking and of supporting each other. And I really believe that these strong ties made this conference possible. And you have to know that the organization of this conference began already in Göttingen, at your in Germany in 2018 at the previous Atgender conference. A group of colleagues and friends, as they have been already mentioned, Giovanna Vingelli, Elia Arfini, Sabrina Marchetti, and Adriano Habed were there, and we met there. And one morning, a flash of madness lit our eyes, and we said, why not? Why not bring it back to Italy? We thought that the Italian women's studies and gender studies community would have deserved a European Feminist Research Conference here after years of attacks from the anti-gender campaigns. And actually these groups of friends and colleagues became then the Italian Scientific Committee, and together we were thinking about this conference. It's really impossible to thank you all enough for the work we did. We also want to acknowledge the strand coordinators. Imagine it's 47 of us that were working as strand coordinators. I cannot name you all now, but really thanks, you did an amazing work. Our advisory board, we have had internal colleagues that helped, that were looking our backs in institutional context. Carmen Leccardi, of course, is one that helped us a lot, and you will hear her later on at the keynote. Marina Calloni, Silvia Penati and Elisabetta Ruspini, they all were really kind and supportive with this conference. In Bicocca, there are 3 women's studies centers, and they all participated to the organization of this conference. And we also want to thank the Institute for Advanced Study of Social Change and the Longitudinal Research Italy that really helped and sustained significantly our conference. It's thanks to all these ties that we are here. As you have heard, Brunella Fiori, Annalisa Dordoni, Rassa Gaffari, and Marco Baccio are colleagues who helped daily with the conference. You already met all our staff. They will be helping you with the presentation, in the round table, in the panels, so at the desk. So they are a focal point for you. And now we wanted to spend some words about the artwork. You can see it here in the background. The artwork of this conference is titled Wind Corridors, and it has been done by Elia Covolan. Elia is an artist that is strongly dedicated to feminist and queer struggles and to raising awareness of the experience of people with disabilities and chronic illnesses. Elia translated for us the keywords of this conference, feminist perspective, in this wind corridor, in a way of thinking about perspectives beyond the gaze, in a tactile and embodied way. This feminist perspective made of wind is fluid and traces a queer path through the cold monolith of the city, unstoppable, like the relentless surge that new struggles that feminist knowledge has to address always. This artwork from Elia has been reinterpreted by Caterina Amato and Beatrice Baracca, who transformed clay, and I hope it works. This clay, they transformed it in the cups that you got at the conference. They were working for at least a month and did them one by one on their own. Yeah. Giovanna Vingelli and her team, as you heard from the Interdepartmental Center of Women's Studies from the University of Calabria, so we could say the South Pole here in Italy, they helped a lot with taking care with the program and with a book of abstracts. They did an incredible work. Many offices here in Bicocca sustained us. The events and logistics office, the online office, the communication and graphics office. Yesterday evening we had a blackout in this part of town, so this morning they were trying to rearrange everything in 1 hour. So we hope that they will continue to support us also during the conference. Last but not least, the Atgender board. Angeliki, you said very nice words. It has been really a wonderful cooperation also for us. We made it through quite complicated moment, a pandemic that obliged us to postpone the conference, the explosion of a terrible war very close by to us, through cultural and organizational differences, through conflicts, but still we managed, and here we are with our conference. You have to know that you can see the 3 of us now, part of the local organizing team, but there is also Stefania Voli that was part of the team. You don't see her here because she's on maternity leave, but imagine her here with us because her work, the conference is the result also of her incredible work. So it has been really an incredible privilege to work with you together, but I would say now I'm good for the next 22 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Sveva. And I would like to thank all those who made it here, but also who follows online, because we know these are complicated times in a way that differ with respect to each our position. Here, to organize a feminist conference means to try to keep a reflexive space alive, starting with the knowledge that has been and is able to discuss the very terms of the relationship that produce knowledge. And at the same time, it means to do so in the current context of long-standing neoliberal organization and structural crisis of the academic world, characterized by austerity, exploitation, competition, which is even further exacerbated by the pandemic, and which, in the specific Italian case, entertains an ambiguous relationship with gender and feminist studies, including scarce resources, lack of recognition, precarity, and the pressures to turn knowledge into individualized and productive logic. And within these limits and possibilities, we have worked through these years and months on a self-organization of the conference without external services. It was stressful and beautiful at the same time. We recognize that in this contradiction we have moved and we move. And here we have also failed. Sometimes in a transfeminist ways, sometimes not. But let's hope, however, that we have created a space in which we can speak. It is in this context that relationships and networks, formal or informal as they are, which already existed or that have been created during this period, have made and are making this conference possible. The organization, indeed, has been collaborative and horizontal through sharing as much as possible responsibility and commitment. And it's thanks to this living weaving of plots which move inside and outside academia that this conference was built. So we hope that this intersection and alliances, we hope will continue to intertwine over the next few days with care, empathy, and complicity. And so, thank you all for being here and to participate together in the realization of the conference during the next days. Thank you.
So I also would like to thank you all for being here, for the contribution you are making to the conference, and also to thank the representative of our institutions, Patrizia Stecca and Sonia Stefanizzi, for the introduction. And with respect to the aims and desires that guide us in building this 11th edition of the conference, we can say that part of the inspiration also came to us from the longitudinal study that had been already mentioned by Sveva Magaraggia, Italy, and our common investigations around the issue of social change, which is at the core of this study. And so as feminist researchers and as part of the community which is gathered here today, we thought that it was urgent for us to frame this question, this issue of social change in feminist and intersectional terms. And then we asked what it means to analyze, to imagine and enact social change from a feminist perspective. Indeed, we think that the feminist, transfeminist, intersectional, and LGBTQIA+ reflections can call into question and can enrich the gaze through which we look at social transformations. And this question is urgent in current situation of multiple overlapping crises, including the pandemic, the environmental crisis, the growth of gender-based violence, and sadly, very sadly, the militarist resurgence also in this part of the world. And all these developments are bringing to light the deadly contradiction, the unsustainable contradictions that are part of the system in which we live, but also they are prompting a thinking of existential and collective priorities inside our community, but hopefully also outside our community. And so against this background, the questions from which we start and that we'd like to address in this conference are the following. How does a feminist agenda look like in time of growing inequalities and of a general backlash on social rights, on sexual and reproductive rights? What are the new struggles that feminist knowledge and feminist practice have to face, and which methods are more suitable to confront them? And finally, which role the legacy of the past radicality can play in our contemporary feminist struggles? These questions, indeed, are very well reflected in the richness of contributions that make up the program, your contributions. And just to give you an idea, as Sonia Stefanizzi said, we received more than 700 proposals, abstracts, from scholars based all over the world. And now we are here, and we have 620 registered participants. So our wish for this conference, then, is that working together around the issues and the questions that I told you during our conversation in the next few days, this will help us to perhaps live a more joyful and also engaged present, and to figure out our feminist alternative futures. So thank you, and enjoy the conference.
Thank you very much, Daniela. I'm happy to call here the Italian Scientific Committee for some words. Here they are.
Giovanna?
Giovanna is coming.
Non c'è Giovanna? Eccola. So, good evening, everyone. It is such a wonderful feeling to see so many friendly faces all here. Thank you so much for making this happening. And yes, as Sveva was saying, it was a crazy moment of ambition to bring back this conference after 20 years in Italy. Some of us had attended it. Personally, for example, I was not there, but we all have heard so much about this conference that is not only for the leisure and the community feeling, but we also know that it was an important opportunity for the young feminists of that moment to have such an event, in Italy in the beginning of 2000, for what that meant for the feminist scholarship, feminist activists of that time, of that moment. So it's with the same intention that we wanted to bring back this conference here. Sveva was mentioning the anti-gender strong attacks on the academia, and I will say more in general on feminist movements in Italy in the last years. So we really hope that having this event happening in this moment in Italy is going to encourage so many feminists in Italy, especially, but not only, to be more brave, to be more confident on the knowledge that they have. We then met, we started to wonder which was the ideal city, the ideal university where to organize that. We were a bit, brainstorming about the venue, and finally the friends from Bicocca came up as candidates, as possible candidates. And we really want to thank them deeply for making this possible. This really our dream coming true, thanks to you. So the organization has been fantastic, very smooth, very much always tune in. And but at the same time, when we started to select, identify the possible topics for the strands, this scientific committee that we are, these people more or less, we also realized that we did not have all the expertise, all the knowledge, all the resources to organize all the strands. So we started to make invitations to other friends and colleagues and experts from Italy and from abroad in order to prepare the call for papers for the other strands. So as I was saying, 47 people joined their forces to organize the conference. I'm crazy enough I wanna list all the names. So this is... In 1 minute, you will see. So, Giorgia Seroghetti, Sara De Jong, Matteo Zani, Carlotta Cossutta, Chris Keenan, Mia Linanson, Nina Ferrante, Osa Ekval, Domi Olivieri, Sibel Yardimci, Federica Timeto, Pat Troic, Beatrice Ravele Bernavente, Silvia Dureschi, Derek Gulcicic, Ilenia Caleo, Annalisa Sacchi, Caterina Lonciarevich, Noemi Novello, Sabine Grenz, Gianluca Argentina, Ino Maia Eloino, Guerna Fiore, Giulia Selmi, Caterina Kolarova, Marianne Schmidbauer, Xenia Nescherova, Annalisa Dordoni, Rasa Caffari, Edita Giust, Sofia Lane, Emanuela Sola, Piedin Stolz, Charlene Calderaro, and thank you all of you for the support they gave to this conference. It would have been impossible without you.
The closing words of this first part are for Sibel. Thanks.
Thank you. I will be very brief. Dear European Feminist Research participants, good afternoon. It's an immense pleasure for me to welcome you all today on behalf of the Atgender board. After 2 years of lockdown and several waves of backlash against gender studies and movements all around the world, it is great to see that more than 600 people, scholars, are coming together for a feminist event. So it feels alive and lively. I'm pretty sure you are sharing my feeling. We are all very excited to move to the first keynote, so I won't be taking much of your time. I just want to second Angeliki's thank yous to all of you, organizers and participants alike. You've made this conference possible. And Angeliki, you are one of these people. We cannot thank you enough for the huge work and effort you put into this. As Atgender, we value that all conference participants feel safe, and we tried hard to ensure this. So please don't hesitate to contact us if anything unexpected or anything that makes you feel insecure, come and find us. We wish you a great conference with lots of fruitful debates. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sibel. We now leave the floor to the second part of the plenary.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's very nice to see you all in this room. Professor Carmen Liccardi will be arriving soon. So I would like now to introduce Professor Barbara Rissman. So Barbara Rissman is a distinguished professor of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at the University of Illinois, Chicago, where she was head of the Sociology department. She spent 2 decades at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, where she founded the Gender and Women's Studies program. She also serves as an editor-in-chief of the renowned academic journal Gender and Society. Throughout her research, she has developed a theory of gender as social structure, analyzing the life of young adults from a gender perspective. She has also worked on feminist social movements, parenting in contemporary families, and on many other topics in the field of sociology and gender studies. She has published many books, including Gender Vertigo, American Families in Transition at Yale University Press in 1998, and Families as They Really Are, co-edited with Virginia Rutter in 2014, as well as a handbook of the sociology of gender. Barbara Rissman has also received many awards as a feminist scholar. Professor Rissman, we are very happy that you have accepted our invitation for this keynote conference. It is an honor to have you speak here at the 11th European Feminist Conference. Thank you very much, and I give you the floor.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. I will say one thing's incorrect. I am no longer the department head, so I have time to actually do more research again. So again, thank you for having me. I am going to talk about a research project, the theory behind a research project that is really quite new to me. I don't usually talk about new projects in big venues for the very first time. Usually I start with small workshops and roundtables. But here I am at what I'm going to be talking about, category X. What does the visibility of people who reject the gender binary mean for gender equality and feminism? And many of the ideas that I'll be talking about today will actually be published in About Gender, an Italian journal, very soon, if not. It looks like it's out today. So, and that is co-authored with colleagues Travers and Colby Fleming. It's already published, so if you're interested, some of these ideas can be found there. I want to start by just telling you a little bit about what I mean when I talk about gender, because we come from many places and many disciplines, and we don't all use the words the same way. So when I talk about gender, I'm talking about gender as a social structure. In the same way that every society has an economic structure, a political structure, every society has a gender structure that has implications for individuals, including identities, and that's really what I'm going to focus on today. But identities don't exist in isolation. They are social products, as is all of social life. And so we also have to talk about the interactions and expectations we have between people as being part of the gender structure, and the institutional rules, regulations, and cultural logics. And so when I talk about gender, I'm including all of that. Even within that, I try to make it even more complicated at the individual, at the interactional, and the more macro level. There are two dimensions of gender we have to worry about. One is cultural, and the other is material. And so I'll talk a little bit about, here we go, the cultural. At the individual level, and really where I'm going to focus attention today, is about ideology, how individual people feel what they mean by gender in their own lives, their identities, how they use their bodies to express their identities. So that sort of at the cultural level, meaning systems for individuals. But at the interactional level, what we expect from each other and what other people expect from us is part and parcel of what we come to think of ourselves and who we are and who we should be or who we don't want to be from those expectations. And so we have to think about the meaning systems, the cultural, the interactional expectations that we have for one another. And then, of course, our institutions don't actually have things called good wives' guides, but they certainly do have sex-segregated rules and regulations. In some countries, even pensions are age-based by gender. In almost every society, you certainly get the cultural logic for why people work long hours with little flexibility, or at least they did before the pandemic. We're at a moment that things may be changing there, was because there was a presumption that a really good worker had a wife if he needed one, right? And so the cultural logics are built into our institutions. In the same way, every level, the individual, the interactional, and the more macro or institutional also has a material dimension. Rather than culture, things you can touch and feel, and for sociologists like me, more easily measure. How people use their bodies to present what they believe, who they are in some authentic way. That's a very material way to think about gender at the individual level. At the interactional level, the sort of idea of tokenism, which is very old, comes back from Roosevelt Cantor in the 1980s. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Here we are. The idea that in a group, if you are the only person of your kind, that affects the interaction and the way things operate. People treat you as a representative of a group. That could be a woman in an all-male boardroom. It also could be an openly non-binary person in an organization where there are no other openly non-binary persons. And so the whole idea of the way interaction is shaped by the kinds of people in the room, and then, of course, very material dimension, wage gaps, gender gaps, who's getting rewarded for doing what kind of work. When you put all of these things together, I actually have written a model that looks something like this, but I'm not going to take your time talking about that right now. If you're interested, you can find various versions of my theoretical work in either my millennial book or the Springer Handbook on the Sociology of Gender. Because for today, what I want to do is use that way of thinking about gender to talk about a specific issue and increasing visibility of people beyond the binary. What does that mean? I'm sure of Feminist Conference, everyone knows what that means by now, but just to say, make sure we're all on the same page. That is, people who no longer identify as women or men, but not necessarily people who have transitioned categories from woman to man or man to woman. That is, people who are assigned as female at birth but are now men. We often use language of transgendered. Non-binary people may consider themselves transgender, but not all of them consider themselves transgender. And so this is a good moment to say, where does any of this information come from? That I'm going to be talking theory today, but it's not entirely sitting in an armchair thinking great thoughts theory. I have, as you saw at the beginning, I had a picture of the National Science Foundation on my front slide. I have a 3-city study, data collected and being analyzed as we speak on non-binary people in the United States. We have 40 interviews done in a West Coast city, 40 interviews in a South city in the South, and 40 interviews in a Midwestern metropolitan area. And I have colleagues across Europe and Australia. One of them, Emanuela Abaticola, is in the front row over here, and also in Spain and in Australia, also collecting data. So the ideas I share with you today are not entirely fabrication. I do not yet, we're literally still coding the data, so I don't have an empirical presentation, but nevertheless, the ideas come from having been collecting data now since right before the pandemic, and I can tell you it took a lot longer during the pandemic. All of our interviews had to be outdoors, socially distanced, and masked. And so we had to go follow the climate across America. When it was cold in the Midwest, we went to Texas. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that. A city in the South. Okay, so this is just, I'm not going to read these two. I'm going to give you a second just to read some of the quotes yourself. These are quotes actually not from my data, from Pink News, a magazine, from people on an article on what it means to be non-binary. But I can tell you the quotes could be from my data. They're nicely representative of the different kinds of ways people talk about rejecting gender categories. So what I want to talk today about is, because we're at a feminist conference and we're all concerned with social change, how do non-binary people exist within or change what I call the gender structure, the worlds in which we live, in which women have traditionally been subordinated to men, in a world in which gender has been primarily theorized in binary terms. Right? My own work has primarily theorized gender in binary terms. And so I have no final answers for you. I have no, this is the right answer. I'm going to raise lots of questions and talk a little bit about how I've seen, how I analyze non-binary folks at different levels of analysis, and materially and culturally, and then some implications for possibilities for the directions of social change. And I want to say right from the beginning, so there's no shock at the end, I am not a believer that social change always moves in the right direction. It can, but it need not necessarily. And so I think that we have to think widely about social change and implications. So when we think about what it is, the ways in which people who are non-binary and go beyond gender, what are the kind of implications for themselves and for the rest of society? Well, at the cultural level, non-binary folks reject the cultural stereotypes for gendered personality traits, right? Women, they certainly reject the notion that only women can be nurturing and men are more effective. But those are kinds of things that almost every feminist in this room would agree with, rejecting those kind of stereotypes about what it means to be a woman or man. They go beyond this in several ways. At the cultural level, they also reject the identity of man or woman. That is, they feel oppressed, and as if they don't, their authentic self is not described by those kind of normative stereotypes around masculinity and femininity, and so therefore they are not women or men. And that's a step beyond where many people go who reject gender stereotypes. But even beyond that, at the material level of the body, most but not all, which is interesting, also reject norms for gendered bodily presentation. That is, they do not feel bound to buy clothes from the part of the store designed for women, if they were assigned female at birth, or men if they were assigned male at birth. But there's no pattern, at least when I look at the people I've interviewed and my colleagues and staff have interviewed. Some people dress more feminine or masculine day by day. Some mix outfits. Some, and some people say, I don't have to change the way I dress at all. It's how I identify, and therefore my presentation of self isn't involved. And so there is no real, I don't think, but they all feel not bound by gendered bodily presentation. At the indirectional level, they also reject gender stereotypes and expectations for self and others, but that too is something that probably everyone in this room does as well, that we don't expect people who are assigned men at birth to take the lead in heterosexual relationships, all those kinds of things. But at the material level, particularly for non-binary folks who use their body to present gender to the world, they have the whole nother level of difference, because they are, in fact, often tokens in a room. That is, they're the only person like themselves, not necessarily in their friendship group, right? Homogeneous social networks develop, of course, among everyone. But they often work or go to school or live in families where they are indeed the only person like themselves. And so they end up being that token in a room. I do want to suggest that that isn't true for all people, because I adapt a concept that comes actually out of a critical race research in the United States. The concept I'm adapting is street race. And the concept of street race is that if you are a mixed race person in the United States, say a mixed race man, and your identity is multiracial, your street race is often still black. That means if you have a run-in with the police person isn't going to ask you, what's your identity, and then treat you in a certain way. He or she is going to treat you in whatever stereotypical way they're likely to treat a black male American. And so the concept of street race is distinct from identity. And I think that that's an important caveat for studying non-binary people as well, because some people are very clearly using body as a way to do identity, but many people, in fact, most of the people we've interviewed have a street gender. That is, in a environment where they're not introducing themselves and identifying themselves, people will presume that they are the gender of the sex they were assigned at birth. So sometimes you get this kind of tokenism, but not always, because this kind of tokenism depends on a street gender being not looking cisgender in a setting, and that's not true for everybody. So, at the macro level, all of our cultural organizations, from religion, right? And there are still religions where only certain sexes can be, only a certain sex, male, can be in leadership positions, right? That's a binary that in religious organizations. But even in elementary schools where teachers line up kids, the boys over here, the girls over here, right? We've built in those kind of binary presumptions into all of the way our organizations work. What's unclear is as we have more non-binary people openly identify, where that category will fit in a material kind of wage gap world. There is some evidence, as one article I've seen, studying non-binary people in the high-tech industry in Silicon Valley. And in that particular small piece of research, the non-binary persons who had been assigned at birth were actually more part of the boys' club than the women who worked in high-tech industries. That is, they were, because they were seen as more masculine than the women, they actually seemed to do better in those highly masculinized, Silicon Valley startup companies. So in other places, I think you'd find something very different. But it's an empirical question. We're in a kind of hierarchy, including material, where people who reject gender categories, and if it will be different for people who were assigned female at birth and are non-binary versus people who are assigned male at birth who are non-binary, because we know that gender is a stratification system, so that if you're assigned female at birth and you're not a woman anymore, you've gone up. If you're assigned male at birth and you're not a man anymore, you've gone down. And so we don't know. These are all open questions, but I think they're worth thinking about. So what are the implications of non-binary visibility for gender theory, for gender measurement? The first is that we better change the way we measure gender, right? Most of the surveys get, are you a man or woman, right? Now, at least some airlines, I don't know if this is all over the world, but certainly when you go on an American Airlines site now, you will have an opportunity to check something other than man or woman. I don't think it matters. They're still going to give you a hassle when you go through security. But, in the U.S. Census, we now have a two-step measure for sex and gender, both what is your sex you're assigned at, I don't remember exact at birth, and also what is the gender you identify with. But we have to think seriously about the strategic politics of non-binary genderqueer identities. And this slide actually comes from a really interesting, if you're interested in the topic, there was a special issue of a journal called the International Network for Sexual Ethics and Politics, edited by Lucy Nicholas, who is actually my colleague in Australia, who's part of this research project. And she suggests that whatever we have, in the past, we have accepted gender as a binary social construction. And whether or not that was ever true, what we believe to be true is true in its consequences. Right? That's Thomas' theorem in sociology. And there has been some debate, particularly in the Australian literatures, about whether or not we're focusing too much on identity and defining individuals at the individual level analysis, and it's taking attention away from the more organizational and macro and economic and political issues and sort of obsessing about the individual level. Nicholas makes an argument alternative to that, which is that actually non-binary identities are in some sense a strategic action in an oppressive gender structure, that people are escaping personal constraints, but even while they're escaping personal constraints, which is about the self, they're also exploding gender categories, so if there are more of them, eventually perhaps the importance of the categories themselves will be undermined. It's certainly, this critique of the binary goes beyond a traditional feminist critique of gender expectations as oppressive. All societal gender expectations are oppressive in this critique, but it's really to be determined is who is this critique useful for? Is it useful only for non-binary people as a kind of personal liberation? Will it change the gender structure and the way gender inequality works, which we have for so very long been thinking about as between men and women? Or does it suggest in some kind of deconstructive way that when we think about gender in this way as beyond a binary, that we are perhaps all non-binary now? The implications for social change are complicated. Language, I think actually we had a conversation about whether language could change in a conference in Trento many years ago. But at this point, gender-neutral pronouns, which are used almost exclusively by non-binary folks, in my studies, you're only eligible for the sample if you use non-binary pronouns. It's kind of a definitional category. Well, of course, in Sweden and in English, they're pretty common now. According to this argument, that I'm citing, it's gaining traction in some European countries and not in all of them. There are some, of course, I don't have the answer here. I will tell you there are very patriarchal societies that have no gendered pronouns at all. Right? So the relationship between language and social change, I think, is complicated and an open question, and I don't have the answer here, but I'm raising questions because I think we're at a moment where much is open for change. But what must change simply to accommodate the people who need to be accommodated? Well, the first things, which has been a ridiculous fight in the United States and seems to be almost a non-issue in much of Europe, is sex-segregated bathrooms. That is, I've been in many bathrooms in Europe where everybody has a stall and a door and there are sinks out there. You have like people writing laws in the United States to make those things illegal. I mean, you wouldn't believe it, but it is true. Sex segregation and religious congregations, the different rules being applied to men and women. What happens if you're not a man or woman, right? I'll tell you a little, just an anecdote. I have a cousin recently married, Orthodox Jew. It was not clear where we have a non-binary person in my family, where they would sit in a congregation where men sit here and women sit here. That's what you call social exclusion, right? Social exclusion. Availability of gender-neutral clothes, or at least clothes of all different sorts to fit all different sorts of bodies, right? Presumptions that children ascribed as girls or boys behave in certain ways, gendered pronouns, and a measurement. So I want to suggest that there are very many liberatory possibilities for social change in this. If any of you know the theoretical work by Raewyn Connell, she argues that the more cracks you have, the more inconsistencies in how the gender structure operates, the more possibilities you have to push for social change, because consistency supports the status quo and and inconsistency supports change. Certainly the fewer expectations you have around gender, the more free people who consider themselves men and women are as well. Girls and boys can play with different kinds of toys, all of those things. Will it help undo gender for men and women, as well as people who are non-binary? I think that's really unknown at this point. But in many societies now, you can be a category X. In the United States, you can have a category X on your passport. In the city of Chicago, starting next year, you'll be able to have a category X on your driver's license. I do believe now we're up to 18 countries where that is true for international passports. I will tell you, among my respondents in the American context, very few people really want this, mostly because they're afraid of discrimination and stigma. What's going to happen if I get stopped for speeding and some, cop sees my driver's license and it says I'm not a woman or man? What's that going to do to me? So there's still we're sensing a great deal of well, that's a great idea, but I'll wait to see how it works out in real life. I think, the 120, I think I could count on my hands the number of people who say, yeah, I'm going to do that. There's too much fear. There's also, I think, a whole lot of backlash, right? This move to have category X on licenses and passports, it happened really, really quickly, right? It took decades to get same-sex marriage to be accepted in many places, maybe more than decades, maybe millenniums, but a long time and a lot of fighting. Nobody really knows how we managed to get category X through all these countries, states, so quickly, but what we do know is it's had backlash. In the United States, the number of red states that have passed incredibly transphobic laws in the last year it's mind-boggling. And I think part of it is the change was so quick and that the pushback is as quick and very violent. These new, I don't know if these are taken off in Europe, but gender reveal parties, the sort of notion that you have a party when you're pregnant and you open a cake and you see that it's red or it's blue, and then the presumption that you know everything you need to know about that person. It's based on anti-feminist gender stereotypes, and they're becoming more popular, not less. It's kind of I'm not part of the new world. I'm supporting the world that feminists perhaps wished we had left behind us. It would be ironic if this new category X ends up being an escape valve for people who are most oppressed by gender as a set of expectations, but therefore leaves the rest of us expected to be more feminine if we identify as women and more masculine if we identify as men, because why not? If you don't fit those categorical stereotypes, you're non-binary. So there is we don't really know where this is going to take us in the future. So I will make a kind of utopian proposal for how feminism should deal with this in a way that some argument I've been making for a long time, even before I actually started doing research on this topic, which is a kind of post-gender society, that we should value and support an explosion of gender categories. People should identify that in some ways that's a very positive thing for feminism because it reduces the significance of the gender binary. That we can, in some way, we have to move feminism beyond the gender binary to bring young feminists and non-binary feminists into and center in a movement that doesn't want to exclude, that wants to be intersectional on identity as well as other kind of categories. And envision a world without gender. And this is a very old quote from a philosopher that I just love, and I am going to end. A just future would be one without gender and its social structure and practices. One's sex would have no more relevance than one's eye color or the length of one's toes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Barbara Rizman, for this really thought-provoking and exciting speech. I especially love the way how you explained your analysis step by step with the rich theoretical approach you develop. I think it's, really exciting. And it's a very impressive way of, entangling complexity regarding gender. So thank you very much for this beautiful speech. We will continue with the Q&A, but first we have an announcement. Yes, thank you for your patience. We are now ready. The technical issue is solved. Okay. So if you don't mind, Professor Rizman, I am thinking of taking a couple of questions. Then we can continue with your answer. Who would like to, I can see a hand here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Professor Barbara. My name is Sara Merlini. I come from Portugal, from the Interdisciplinary Center of Gender Studies, and I actually did a PhD on non-binary in Portugal and the UK. So I was thinking about if you could comment about this Western idea of binary genders, because in Australia, for example, you have different cultural ways of seeing gender. So in a way, non-binary always existed somehow. At least for my point of view, I saw non-binary as non-exclusive, not only rejecting categories, but also being a way of redoing gender and alternatively. So I would like to know more about the Australian case and all of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'll take one more question. Okay, here we go.
Thank you for an exciting lecture. I actually share your views, but I wonder what you think of the consequences of your final position that feminism should go beyond gender. For feminism itself, there is a huge conflict around Europe, I think very visible in Italy, certainly very visible in Britain, between gender-critical feminists and the kind of constructionists that I think you represent, and I do too, but I worry about the future of feminism, whether that means excluding all kinds of essentialism or some kind of adjustment. And I have a smaller historical question. How do you think non-binary compares to androgyny? And I'm thinking of the kind of elite feminist ideas and styles associated with the Bloomsbury Circle and modernism in general. In other words, is androgyny and non-binary completely different, or is there some kind of resonance? Thank you very much.
Okay, can I, if I hear more than those, I don't have a piece of paper and a pencil here, and I will forget the questions. So let me start with the first one. I absolutely think that the kind of binary that I've been talking about is probably a kind of colonial influence, and that in pre-modern times in some societies there were more genders, although I think that that's more complicated than that simple answer, because I think in many of these societies gender and sexuality were often are entwined in such a way that there was a way in which other genders were people who in other societies might be called sexual minorities. And to live as a sexual minority what involved being part of a gender non-binary gender group. Such people did tend to have place in society, but were also, this is a big generalization, still kind of stigmatized. They were not really the center. They were not in the center. They were at the fringes, but there was a place. So I think that in terms of, I will say my personal opinion is that essentialism has no place in feminism. I think that social science really, I think that's an opinion that is not, certainly it's an ideological opinion, but I think it's based on a lot of social scientific research that shows the variability of what we think of as femininity and masculinity across time and place and culture. And so the kind of biological essentialist argument, I think, falters when looked at through a social scientific evidentiary lens. I also think, and this is purely perhaps an ideological opinion, that a feminism that isn't inclusive isn't really a feminism. That is, a feminism that doesn't include all people who identify as women is not really feminism. Am I being clear?
Yeah, that's a very interesting answer to a very hard question that many of us might share. I have to take two more really quick questions. I see. I kindly ask you to, make the question very quickly because we need to move on due to the time limitations. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I hope.
Yeah.
I hope it's switched on. Thank you for your.
Asking more than one question, come in at a time.
Okay.
Of course.
Thank you for your talk. I have a question that relates to the other questions now. The first one is kind of, I'm feeling a bit troubled about that you talk. I'm here.
Oh, there you are. I'm
Sorry.
looking and looking. Okay. Sorry. I was searching for you.
Yeah. I'm feeling a bit troubled about that in your talk, you talked about a group of people. I know it's always kind of difficult how to manage that, but did you not also kind of tokenize when you showed some pictures of people? I would have liked that maybe you can situate yourself more and talk a bit more about why are you talking about non-binary people? Maybe that would help to avoid this kind of trouble or tokenism. And also, are we not already in the fourth wave? There is already queer feminism, and also for many years, like Gloria Ansaldúa, who talked about borderlands, and Paul Preciado, and so on. So, because you said it's a utopia, but I think we're already there.
Okay.
One more question there, very quick, please.
I'm going to be so quick. Thank you so much, Professor Esman. I was just thinking that will this trend for gender binary acceptance trigger another sort of activism that's rather different from feminist and queer activism? How would you envision this related with other questions as well?
Let me try those two before we go on. I can only keep so much in my mind at one time. So the question about why are we seeing sort of this increasing visibility of non-binary people at the moment, I think is really an interesting one. And I think I don't have the answer, but I'll tell you what kind of a debate that I've seen happening. There was, for those of you who are on social media, I read this on Twitter, so I can't really tell you where the blog sits, but there's a transgender scholar whose name is Carrie Costello, who recently wrote a blog on this topic. If you Google, you'd probably find that blog pretty easy. I read it on Twitter. And I've read much other work by Costello in the past. So Costello argues that there have always been people, as many people non-binary as there are now, but that in the past, the oppression has been so overwhelming that people didn't even have self-knowledge or admit to it. And the analogy Costello uses is about left-handedness. In the middle of the 20th century, there were about 4% of people who were left-handed. And the minute they got into public school, they were punished and taught they had to write with their right hand. Somewhere towards the middle, I don't know when it was, 70s, 80s, the psychologists decided, well, maybe left-handedness wasn't wrong. It was just different. And they stopped punishing children and forcing them to write with their right hand. And over the next 20 years, the percentage of left-handed people rose every year to about 12%. This is all, I have no idea if any of this is true. I'm telling you what I read by a respectable scholar on a blog. And then it stopped rising. It went into about 12%, and then it kind of leveled off. And Costello argues that it was probably always about 12% in a kind of population way, but there was so much punishment and stigma that, it didn't. So that's one argument. Another argument, and maybe equally well, different hypothesis. I'm agnostic at this moment, is that we have raised a generation of children, in some senses, who have been told they can be anything they want to be, that they should be free, that, girls can be scientists and boys should be, good daddies. And so we've got these feminist ideas floating around, and people are raising their children with them. But then these same children go out in the real world, in the world beyond their families and their and we live in bubbles too, right? Our families and our neighborhoods, and then they go out into the workforce or even just to a different kind of school, or they have friends that are not their parents' friends' kids, and they realize none of this is true, that the boys are going to get teased and called sissy if they do something that other boys don't do. The girls, want to play on boys' soccer teams or football teams, and what I should use the correct language, and the boys won't pass to them. They wouldn't pass to them 20 years ago, and they still won't pass to them. So, because little boys still don't treat girls like people. And so that you've got a generation raised with kind of a critique of gender stereotypes who find out that they're still getting screwed over when they break those stereotypes. And so they are prime for wanting nothing to do with the category. I could make a case for either of those arguments. I don't think we have the empirical, I don't know, but it's something to think about, which is my job here, because I never claimed I had all the answers. The fourth wave, aren't we already in the fourth wave? I hate the wave analogy. I think because when we try to, I understand it, and I even have used it in my writing, so I'm being provocative, but when you think about how is the second wave different from the third wave, you can go back and find lots of people in the second wave who are what we now say is more like the third wave or the fourth wave. And so I actually think feminism has always had lots of different kinds of voices at different times. And I don't think So I don't think, and I think we are at a moment where feminism is both more and more widely accepted and also more and more widely rejected, right? That there's both, as feminist ideas and queer ideas become more mainstream, people who never liked them in the first place are pushing back, right? The anti-gender sort of movement in Italy, all the not only anti-transgender, we've had some bills passed in, I think, the Alabama legislature recently, Florida had a don't say gay bill, that you can't talk about being gay issues in elementary school. I mean, and so there's a, I think there's a push and pull okay.
Professor Risman, we have to move on. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I know that you will be joining to some panels, workshops, so I do encourage all of you to catch up with Rizman's presentations.
Anyone about it, and I'd love to hear if anybody here is doing similar work.
Lovely. So, yeah. And now I'm honored to introduce Professor Carmen Liccardi. We are so glad that you are with us today. You accepted to give your keynote talk. Carmen Liccardi is a professor of sociology here at the University of Milano-Bicocca. She is also head of the research center Cultures of Gender. And she was the president of European Sociological Association from 2013 to 2015. Her research interests include quite a range of things, actually, like processes of cultural change, with a specific focus on gender and generational differences. She has written many articles, many books, especially on social time and about young women's experience of time from a feminist perspective. So it's very impressive, and thank you again for accepting our talk. We are looking forward to it. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And so I would like, first of all, to tell you all that I am truly happy to see you, colleagues from here and from far away from here, especially after these very, very difficult years we experienced right now. So my presentation, as you are seeing on the screen, is a reflection which is born together with my own researches in relation to the place of ambivalence in different expressions of feminism. With an S, a plurality of feminism today. So I wish to start here with the concept, of course, of ambivalence, because without taking into consideration, of course, here very, very quickly, this concept, it is impossible to follow the meaning of my reflections today. So what is ambivalence, and why is ambivalence, in my view, so important also in understanding what's going on from the 70s onwards until current decades as regards different ways of being a feminist. I would like to underline, first of all, a point, that is to say that you will see, even though as each of us, we are following at the same time an international debate, as well as, of course, our specific national contradictions. We will cope with the topic of role of ambivalence in relation to the Italian situation. Of course, I am an Italian sociologist. even though I like Europe very much. And I feel an European from different point of view, but I start from an Italian consideration. Thank you very much. Can I have a glass to drink some water? Thank you. Thank you. So, as I have told you, I would like to start with the concept of ambivalence. In our tradition, I am a sociologist, and particularly a sociologist of culture. Many thanks. Thank you very much. This concept has got a long history, starting from Simmel. Perhaps you will have in mind the reflection of Simmel about the ambivalence of money. The ambivalence of money is related to the contemporary presence of alienation related to money, but also of opening up of horizons of action. I don't enter, of course, in these topics here, but those of you who are in a way familiar with sociology surely will remember what Merton will say about ambivalence, because for Merton this is related to the contemporary presence of norms, social norms, which has a lot to say for our feminism today, as well as with counter norms. But I don't enter this reflection. Instead, I will go directly to Simonetta Tabboni. Simonetta Tabboni was a wonderful woman and scholar. Unfortunately, she died a few years ago, and her reflection on ambivalence was related both with, of course, the emblem, so to say, of the ambivalence today, which is the stranger. The stranger is contemporary enemy for some people, but also a source, a source of identity, of pleasure, of novelties, and so on and so forth. But what I would like to underline here is specifically the fact that Simonetta was involved in lots of empirical research in France. You won't find all these articles or chapters or books translated into English, because many of her reflections are related to France, and she writes in French. Birgitta Nedelman is a German sociologist, and she wrote in German, and of course also in English. And Calabro wrote in French and Italian. So, don't worry. Anyway, I will try to go quickly to this topic of ambivalence from a research perspective. If I think, for example, to the analysis of Tabboni in relation to France, I would like to focus on the events, vicissitudes with the Islamic veil, for example. Based on the Muslim faith, a significant number of young women today choose to cover their heads in public spaces. Simonetta Tabboni has underlined how this choice implies two contradictory or contradicting needs: remaining faithful to the Islamic tradition on the one hand, and at the same time, on the other hand, reinventing this tradition. Cultural ambivalence is the key to understanding this duplicity and to exploring it from a sociological point of view. The veil is a symbol of adherence to Islam precepts, but also a vehicle of their transgression, as it coincides with the entrance of women into the public sphere. Through the veil, then, these young women, they embrace and violate the tradition at the same time. The enclosure of women in the private sphere passed down through generation on the basis of some hierarchical distinction between the genders is overcome thanks to the use of the veil. But the veil also protects from the potentially dangerous for personal integrity outcomes of the modern choice to study and work outside the home, competing against men. So this is just, how to say, an example. I cannot go deeper into that due also to my time here. And I will just focus on this specific issue. If we think about ambivalence, then we can see a social actor, in our case, the women movement in its different expression, which has to choose among different forms of agency. They are, in most cases, these forms of agency, conflicting, but also they are interdependent. So ambivalence could be, as I will try to explore, a sort of lens through which we can see the interplay of this sort of ambivalence related to agency and the historical time in which women as individuals express their visions. So I go directly to the, I would say, main issue here. That is to say, the feminism in the 70s and 80s, and the ambivalence between equality and difference. Of course, I have to refer here to the important reflections proposed at the end of the 80s by Scott, and the sort of pointing to ambivalence already in her analysis. However, I proposed here some names of scholars, Italian scholars, who are, mostly of them wrote in Italian, because also their reflections took place not in an academic, strictly academic world. But I would like at least to point to Bertilotti, 2020, book, which is written in English, and Bertilotti in a way summarized the debate. As regards, in particular, feminism and difference, we have here, you will know very well, the point, of course, because I'm sure you already read a lot about that, and also, thanks to the organizers, our organizers here at the Milano-Bicocca, we will have a visit to Libreria delle Donne, which is one of the most important places where, in particular, the topic of difference has been brought about. So, I would just focus on the fact that in the 70s, we all know that the feminist movement expressed as extraordinary energy of political and social innovation, while we also very well know that in the 80s and in the 90s, I would say, there is a focus, and in Italy too, a focus especially on topics like cultural practices, like I would underline the fact the centrality of individuality and the centrality of a work on oneself together with other women and men in some cases, but it's not especially political participation in the 80s and the 90s as it was in the 70s. So, I am perhaps able, as my time is going quickly on, to just reflect with a thought, a further thought about the fact that this less capacity of social mobilization in the 80s and 90s expressed in a way also a sort of renewal of ambivalence, in the sense that on the public scene, this contradiction between equality and difference was less remarkable. But the ambivalence was there, and we are seeing that now when we are talking in the new, we are talking on feminism in the new century. Of course, I decided to select the topics due also to time shortage. And I want here to enter into relation with masculinity here as regards recent years, and I don't want to enter the so-called transsexuality issue in relation to feminism. I don't want, even though I would have liked to do that, but having to choose due to my time, I decided to point to different, more general, if I could say, topics. But here, in this slide, you can see a word which is, in my view, a sort of key word for discussing about new ambivalences, and this is precarization of young women's life. And in that sense, let me say only really very little words about that, but if you think about precariousness, this is related to a dimension of ambivalence, because on the one hand, it is associated with a negative language structured around the idea of instability as vulnerability and weaknesses. On the other, we must say, on the other hand, there is a new use of this precariousness to reinvent feminism, of course, making good use of the virtual spaces and to express one's subjectivity. And in a sense, I would like to stress also that in this scenario, the generational identity is, in a sense, to consider a priority over gender identity. But at the same time, the collective subjectivity is somewhat taken for granted. This is important because these are years of deep experimentations within women's circles, women activism, as well as experimentation on one's sexual subjectivity, which is, I imagine, the topic that was discussed here with Barbara. Before me, I could not arrive here at time to completely listen to her speech, but we will have further possibility in the coming days. But this is so very important to focus. I go to the end of my short speech going to, this is a short memory of the issue of differences and sexual subjectivities, because this is a topic I cannot discuss now. However, it's at the core of the new feminism. But I would especially underline the fact that one's desires, choices, and self-determinations becomes the topic of one's being in the world and one's being a woman today. So the refusal of the victim mentality is very, very strong in this scenario. Victim mentality was, according to a certain narrative, the mentality of the feminists in the 70s. Okay. But what's the role of ambivalence here? And I go to the end. The role of ambivalence is related to those analyses that stress the fact that there is a girl power, there is, according to Anita Harris, among others, the can-do girl. There is a sort of openness, freedom, possibilities that, on the other hand, meet neoliberal cultural canons, as McRobbie already underlined at the end of the first decade. So, new ambivalences related to the emphasis on freedom of choices, women empowerment, and the growing oppression of inequalities in social life constitute the scenario, I would say, in which nowadays we are in. And then this is my final thought. My final thought then is the following. Can ambivalence be useful in thematizing feminism? And my answer is yes, of course. I consider ambivalence a very, very flexible and useful topic. However, what I consider so important is the fact that feminism, even though we thought about this polarization between equality and feminism, was already against any dualities, so much as current feminisms are over this idea of binarism, or this idea of, you have to stay here or you have to stay there. This idea of conflicting positions in my mind are conflicting with what is going on right now. I conclude my last minute with this idea. We are living in a world, social world, in which individualization processes are growing and growing, and at the same time, ambivalence is entering deeper and deeper in our way of thinking the world, thinking ourselves as subject, and thinking, of course, social change, as our conference here intended and wishes to focus upon. So, I end this very short presentation focusing on the fact that ambivalence is not an enemy. It's, I would say, a very, very good analytical friend if we make a good use of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Leccardi, for this very interesting talk. So we really apologize, but because of time limitations, we will not be able to take any questions now, because as you probably know, the panels will begin at 4. But we really encourage you to ask your question to Professor Leccardi whenever you have the chance in the coming days. So I really want to thank you again, Professor Barbara Reisman and Professor Carmen Leccardi, for these two first keynote conference of this European Feminist Research Conference. So we wish you all a very first afternoon of the conference, and I give the floor to Marco Baccio for a few information. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you. Just a second that I change the presentation. So, first of all the panels of this conference will happen on ground floor of U6, so the building where all we are now. So you just need to walk behind me, so straight, and then on the right side you will find all the rooms of this conference. So you don't need to take any lift or elevator or whatever to go to your conference. This conference is absolutely full, accessible for everyone. The only two occasions where we are not here will be the workshops that we will be in building U7, that is the building behind us that maybe you saw earlier. And both workshops will be on the 3rd floor. If you want to attend the second workshop, you need to register. And if you go back to the desk of Atgender, you will find a piece of paper when you can write down your name and enroll for that specific workshop. Aula Magna, that is this room, will be we will close this room after any plenary session. There are a total of 4 plenary sessions. This is the first, so we'll have other 3 plenary sessions, and we close the doors immediately straight after. So please do not forget anything of your belongings. Tonight there will be a welcome drink that we called, as you can see here, Meet for Drinks. You have received the badge when you take your badge and when you take the material of the conference. So you are all invited to this Meet for Drinks. There are a total of 6 pubs that we choose for this conference. They are very close. It's like 500 meters from here. So you have to go outside U6, that is this building, enter U7, that is the other building behind us, exit on the other side, and just continue until you will arrive to the main square that is called Piazza della Trivulziana. And there you will find all the 6 pubs for the Meet for Drinks. Check the name of your pub before to going there. The name is written on the page that we gave you earlier, okay? Then it's important, other things. The first one is about the social activities. As you know, there will be an aperitivo tomorrow and also another one on Friday, but they are already full booked. So the people that already registered receive all the information about them. But there are also sociological tours. There are still space for these tours. So if you go to our website, you will find all the information. So if you want to take one of these tours, you can still enroll until tomorrow at noon. So please do that as soon as possible. Finally, we have maps, free maps of the city of Milan. So if you want to check out something, we are not really centered compared to the city center of Milan, but you can take the subway and go in town very easily. And final things, Charlene already said, but it's very important that you wear a face mask all the times, both for this session and all the other parallel sessions. I know that we all come from different countries with different legislation about face masks, but here in Italy, and especially during this conference, is absolutely mandatory to wear a face mask at all times, not only during the plenary, but also during your parallel session. So please wear a face mask at all time. You can remove your face mask when you eat or when you are outside the buildings. But when you are inside, you are always obliged to wear a face mask. It's important so we can protect each other. Thank you very much.